This is Canon Fodder, episode 57, live from Middle Earth. This week, my guest, Nikolas, on for his third appearance, right, Nick? It's
That's right.
episode 3.
Yep.
And you are not only a friend of the show, you are also a patron of the show. Every paying subscriber to the Double Dealer gets their own episode. So, Nikolas, you chose this. The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. Well, you chose the whole series, and we're gonna end up doing the whole series together. But
It still only counts as one.
right, yes, exactly. So if you're out there listening to this and you want your own episode and you want to, break the rules a little bit, say pick a whole series, you can do that, and I will honor the agreement. So that's a little extra incentive for all of you freeloaders out there. I'm just kidding. Very grateful for everyone listening. And this, I'm excited to do this one because I'm probably the only right-wing guy in our spheres who's never read the Lord of the Rings until just now. Not a big fan of the movies, not really a big fan of the fantasy genre in general. I'm sure I'll get some hate for that, but that's just the way it is. So Nikolas, before we kind of get into the book itself, I guess what was I missing? What's from your point of view? What is so attractive about Tolkien and the Fellowship in general?
Oh, good question. I think the fantasy genre is sort of I've heard this called the right wing genre par excellence.
Mm,
I don't know if you're familiar with Ormulus or if anyone listening is. He doesn't post too much, and he does some like Evola translations, but he has a really good thread about fantasy and just how the themes are basically unsubvertible. There's conversation. I was engaged with this guy on the timeline today. He was kind of making fun of George Martin, who is a notorious shitlib, but his book is about how they need to maintain this big wall to keep the invaders out. And I made the point that ultimately, in the end, it's the super nationalist Northerners who end up beating kind of like the empire financiers. And basically, fantasy is just a genre that you can't subvert it. It's like I just, the themes always call to me, and no matter what you do, even shitlibs turn into chuds when they try to write it.
what's Conquest Third Law? Everybody's conservative about that, which he knows best.
Yeah. So, I wasn't really pulled into Lord of the Rings necessarily because I was like politically astute or anything like that. I was in, I think, 5th or 6th grade, sitting at my, at our computer desk at home, and I needed to read a book for a book report. And my mom had The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings under the desk. So I pulled out The Hobbit and I read it, did my book report. I loved it. And then soon after that, the Fellowship of the Ring came out in theaters for the first time. And it just became part of my identity at that point. Like, it was something I was really into. So I read the books. I was still in grade school, and I've probably read it. I've lost count, probably 7 or 8 times, I think. It's just the one that I always come back to. I'm a big sucker for character and for theme. And, Tolkien is obviously a very talented writer. But the themes, I think, it speaks to my heart. It's like a true myth. They say myth is, it's like a historical truth that, it's not prehistory. It's a timeless reality that repeats itself in history. And Tolkien, he writes about this in his letters, how there's basically some truths that he just tapped into. He was trying to do a lot of things. He wrote The Hobbit first as just a children's book, for fun. And in parallel, he was kind of creating this Elvish language. And eventually he decided he wanted to roll The Hobbit into something larger. And he already had the framework for his language, and he spun it all up into this grand myth that he wanted it to be sort of a foundational myth for England. They didn't really have Anglo-Saxon foundational myths. And so he wanted to, to tap into his deep knowledge of history and myth writing, and he put it together. And so there's just a lot of power in the story. And As different strokes for different folks, though. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But for me, that's what's brought me back to it over and over.
It's so interesting that you bring up the sort of mythopoetic aspect of the Lord of the Rings in general, right? Uh, Tolkien, of course, fought in the Great War,
Mm-hmm.
and this work would not exist without his experience in World War One. The famous line where Gandalf is fighting the Balrog. You shall not pass. I mean that's right out of Verdun. You know,
Mm.
uh, and it's interesting that Tolkien is trying to, in the wake of the most terrible thing to happen to Europe,
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to create this myth, right? And I've discussed on this show through several different works the sort of end of the British Empire and colonialism, and it all sort of the nexus point is World War One,
Mm.
right? So that Tolkien is maybe living through that as well. I haven't read his letters, so I wouldn't be able to. I don't know what his thought process was, but just putting the pieces together and doing a little bit of speculation on my part, it's like he saw how devastating that war was, and in the way that like Aeneas, or not Aeneas, sorry, Virgil wrote the Aeneid, right, on to give the Roman Empire a foundational myth, or the Iliad and the Odyssey are the
Yes.
foundational myths of Greece, right, of ancient and classical Greece. You've got this academic, this Catholic, and we'll get into that as well, his religion, but uh, he's trying to keep his civilization going in the wake of the most terrible thing that has ever happened to that point.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Based on my reading, Sauron represents sort of the force of, um, you could call it industrial progress, but it's a really bad kind of progress. And Saruman, as you continue to read through TR, if you just sub in, um, what's his name, Klaus Schwab from the WEF. It,
Mm.
some of the speech, the pitch that Saruman makes to Gandalf when he says, "Hey, the world is changing. A new order is rising. We, the elites, have the power to order it, and we can do all these great things. We just need to take the power. And, Sauron is, it's going to be his way, and we've got to get on his side, and we can help make it the way that we want." And so Tolkien is just so keen into these forces that are really out of the Enlightenment, sweeping through Europe and changing it. And he's a little bit, you could say maybe like paleoconservative. And yeah, it's a great point about wanting to make a foundational myth. Humans, we need stories. The stories that we believe in drive our behavior. And there's like this post-war narrative, quote unquote. You probably hear that phrase a lot, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
determines the ideology, the framework through which most normal people see the world today. And again, it's a narrative. We need narratives to guide us. And Tolkien, to his credit, he understood that. And yeah, he wanted to create a foundational myth for his people that was reactionary it was a reaction against the forces that he saw unfolding for evil in the world. And what are the traits that men need to resist it? What is the image of good? What's the image of evil? And how do they conflict with each other? So again, yeah, just he's a brilliant man. He was so tuned in to hit the history of his world, to myth making, almost to an autistic level. Like Nikola Tesla was autistic about electromagnetism. J.R. Tolkien was the same level of obsessed with this stuff that he was creating. And he says legends and myths are made of truth. Long ago, there were certain truths and modes that are rediscovered, and they always have to reappear. And he's trying to do something really big and ambitious with this novel. And I think it's going to be part of Western canon. When we win and when we're on
I mean,
Mars
I think it
someday.
already is.
That
At
yeah,
least, if not officially, at least culturally. I mean, this,
yeah,
nobody reads these days, but young men do find their ways to Tolkien,
yep,
one way or another.
yeah.
Except this young man, I did not. But then again, I also just didn't read much as a kid, and maybe that definitely to my detriment. And I wonder if I had picked up The Hobbit, because the thing is, when I was growing up, books were, I don't know, like Harry Potter was still like the biggest thing in the world when I was growing up, right?
Yep.
I'm probably just a little bit younger than you are, uh, if not the same age, and uh, Harry Potter was the big thing, and that was what everybody in my school was reading. And I tried to read it, and I was like, this, whatever, it's fine,
Mhm.
Uh, what's on TV? I was big on watching TV, and yeah, I guess I didn't have the discipline. It wasn't, my parents aren't really big readers either, um, and yet I'm hopefully for my children, I'll be able to buck that trend, and
Yeah.
they'll be uh, big readers as they age.
Well, I never got into Harry Potter either. That was actually rolling out right when I was picking up Lord of the Rings, and so I was trying to be like the hipster almost, or like the
Mm,
contrarian. Like, no,
right,
this one's better. It's like I like classic rock more than punk rock type thing.
right.
So, but yeah, no.
Well, and
Hopefully, when you
now
get
punk
through,
rock is classic rock.
sure. Hopefully, when you get through all three of them, you feel the power, and it's something that you come back to. But if not, like I said, different strokes for different folks.
Well,
You like what you like, and
I certainly appreciate the book. Right. I don't want anybody to come away thinking that like I'm a hater, right?
sure,
Just not something I like. You've read it 7 or 8 times. You'll probably read it 7 or 8 more times, I'm guessing, in your life,
yeah,
if not more. And for me, it's probably something that maybe I'll read to my kids, but not something that I'll actively pick up again and again.
yeah,
Uh, I will say the themes are excellent. They I really like Frodo as a character.
yeah.
He is he's not who a hero is supposed to be. He's small. He's old, for a hobbit, but he's still, well, no, he's old for like a man, but he's still pretty young, you know.
Mhm.
All like he, if I remember correctly, he's like just on the cusp of adulthood, right? So he's still, kind of boyish, and hobbits in general are, just kind of like whimsical, boyish kind of people, you know. They have their farming, and they just, they otherwise just sit around smoking weed. uh,
Tobacco.
sorry, they're pipe weed, I meant to say. Uh, but yes, definitely a distinction that should be made at the top. But they're an unserious kind of people, and to think that the savior of this world is not somebody like Boromir, right? Who's a more classical sort of knight in shining armor type, right? To think that this, or even Gandalf, who's like the sage advice giver, uh, powerful sorcerer who can do, you know, amazing things, right? Both of those guys, they're not, they don't have the character to carry the ring all the way back to Mordor.
Yeah, so I think Frodo might be like 33 when he gets the ring. I think I could be misremembering, but it was the coming of age age for hobbits, and that's when he gets it. And I think Tolkien was definitely intentional when we talk about making a myth for his people, why he chose the hobbits as the main characters. And in fact, I think in one of his letters, Tolkien says if you really had to pin down one, like the hero, I think he actually said it was Sam, like for being the most
Mm,
humble of all. And obviously, you need Aragorn, the king, to return. You need Gandalf, who's basically in Tolkien's metaphysics the equivalent of an angel. I actually have a theory that Gandalf is sort of a stand-in for Mercury and or Hermes. So, if you go back through the pagan roots of Europe, Hermes started in Egypt, and he was the messenger god of learning and of education, and he came to basically give knowledge to men so that they could continue to develop, and to be, co-creators, to help unfold God's creation. And then, of course, I believe Mercury was sort of the Roman appropriation of Hermes, again, as the messenger god, on behalf of the Godhead. And there's a few reasons other than just the character is a good stand-in there. Tolkien or Gandalf repeatedly says, I'm not meant to be the leader or the hero. I'm meant to come here and to give you guys wisdom, to put you on the path that you need to be on. And, I'm not the hero. And when he gets the ring, he gets the ring of fire from Círdan, the Elvish shipwright. Círdan gives the ring to Gandalf, and he says, with this ring, I hope that you can, what does he say? Like inspire, fire in the hearts of men. And other than the fact that his role really fits nicely with this niche of like the messenger angel, everything's silver too. And of course, Mercury, is a silver element, but Gandalf was gray. He rides Shadowfax, who is pure silver. Fleet of Foot, is Shadowfax, and Mercury was a fleet-footed messenger too. So there's plus the last thing I'll say, there's a picture of Tolkien when he was in school. He had dressed up as Hermes for like a Halloween party or something. So I think there's a lot of things that just point to Gandalf kind of at least fitting that mold. And if Tolkien wasn't intentional about it, I like to believe he was anyways. But that's a long tangent. That's one of my schizo theories. But aside from all of that, again, Tolkien chose the hobbits, I think, because the lofty powers are going to do what they need to do. But it's the small man, the everyman, who needs to unlock the hero's spirit in his heart. Like that's the message. It's sort of anti-messianic, where of course Aragorn is going to come and take care of Sauron and make the world right. And you haven't gotten to this point. Maybe we can wait until we do the Return of the King. The scouring of the Shire is an extremely important, maybe the most important chapter in the book, because ultimately the hobbits need to come back and take what they've learned. They've gone through character development and they need to set the Shire right. So they're the heroes. And I think Tolkien was intentional about picking them as the heroes of this great myth, because look, you can't just rely on a king coming to save everything. Ultimately, all you little people who are reading this need to find that spirit in your heart as well. So Frodo's definitely interesting in that regard, and Sam, because you don't expect the small man to save the world, but that's part of the theme. Is no, actually, you've got to take care of business too, whoever you are.
Oh no, definitely. I liked everything you said there. Especially, I hadn't considered, any sort of Greek or Roman influence, but I could easily be convinced that you're right.
I don't think many other people have considered it either. Like I said, I'm just obsessed with this book, and that's just one of my few schizo theories, anyways. So hopefully, some of the listeners who enjoy Lord of the Rings see a little light bulb go off in their head.
I was also because I was thinking also of the one famous sort of Anglo-Saxon work that we still have. There's probably others out there, but the one that is top of mind is Beowulf.
Yep.
And Beowulf is everything that Frodo is not. He's the strongest, he's the fastest, he's the best swimmer, he's a great, powerful king. He can, do this and that. He depending on, I know, it's funny, Sean Bean plays Beowulf in the animated sort of film adaptation.
Did not know that.
Yep, yep. But there's a reason that it's kind of been hidden away. It's not great.
Hmm.
Um, but
Did you
in
know
in
Tolkien did a translation of Beowulf?
yes, I did know that.
Yeah,
So all that is to say that that Tolkien is definitely pulling on. I just I wish I knew more of more Anglo-Saxon literature besides just Beowulf, but maybe we just don't have all that much.
yeah,
Um, I did want to say it's really interesting that Tolkien is laying out the hero's journey beat for beat before Joseph Campbell sort of puts out
yes,
Hero with a Thousand Faces, where and I would say Tolkien masters the monomyth before Campbell really has a chance to kind of piece it all together for himself. It's like it's like watching a coach in some sort of sport try and teach somebody something. Meanwhile, you have like the natural athlete who just does,
yeah,
like, and obviously, not to take away from Tolkien's work ethic, sorry, or his his study but it's just it just glides off the page, and you really can just map out each and every step that Frodo. He doesn't want the Ring of Power. He's got Gandalf, who is the wise old sage. Like everything that George Lucas intentionally tried to do with Star Wars
yep.
after reading Campbell, Tolkien just does because he knows it's a good story. He knows the story. He knows how it's supposed to be.
And yeah, great point. I'm glad that you picked that up. The uh, the book one, in my opinion, is Frodo's initiation into this sort of mythical cult of heroes. Yeah, he kind of speed runs the hero's journey, and it just in book one alone. And
Mm-hmm.
I think if you probably zoom out on this fractal, you see Frodo kind of go through it again. But just in book one, he gets the tool from Gandalf. He gets thrust into the unknown. Um, you could say again when he meets Tom Bombadil, that's sort of another encounter with God. And there's a lot of
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Tom Bombadil. I'm glad you brought him up.
well, I'll get there.
Yeah, sure,
We'll
sure.
probably get there in a little bit, but and then there's the scene where when he goes into the Barrow Downs, and he has to beat back the Barrow Whites. So that's his confrontation with death and overcoming death. And then of course he gets stabbed, and he actually physically comes to the brink of death before he's saved by Elrond. And then by the time book one concludes, Frodo's sort of completed this small cycle of the hero's journey. And now, the point of the hero's journey is it transforms the character.
Mm-hmm.
And Frodo is certainly transformed just in the first half of the first part of the trilogy. Now he's already gone through one cycle, and he's a different person than he was when he set out, because he sort of hits these milestones. And it speaks to Tolkien's, like I've mentioned before, how plugged in he is to myth making as an art and as a science, and how well read he is that, I think Odysseus goes through the hero's journey. I think obviously Jesus does. There's plenty more in I guess you just call it Western canon of these characters who go through this. And you're right, before it's actually formalized, Tolkien just gets it. And it's funny how he hits each one of these, plot points just naturally.
So you brought up Tom Bombadil before, and we're gonna go all over the place. I don't think besides me, this is my first time reading through. I think most people who are listening to this have probably read the book. So doing a plot summary is probably just not the best use of
Sure.
our time.
Right.
I'd rather talk about theme. I'd rather talk about
Yeah.
character. I'd rather talk about illusion, right? And all the fun stuff. We
Yeah.
could go. There's some really good audiobooks out there of the Fellowship and of the whole trilogy that people can go listen to. I think even a few on YouTube if they don't get taken down. So I highly recommend those rather than just two guys talking about the plot. If you know, anyway. So Tom Bombadil is so interesting because he almost, yeah, from my read, and I didn't read the poem, right? But it's kind of neither here nor there. But he to me he reads like both completely out of place and also maybe the only person who is at home in Middle Earth as a character. He's so like the fact that the one ring doesn't affect him at all, right? He can see Frodo just fine. He's just kind of a silly guy with a lot of powers who just loves his wife and likes helping people. Very very simple guy, but also incredibly powerful. Maybe as I say it out loud, it may be one of the earliest allusions to Christ in the book.
I thought that he was almost like a stand-in for God, if not Christ,
Mm-hmm.
but just older than that, which is oldest, the father of all these woods. Yeah, he's kind of above it all. He's outside it all. But at the same time, in Tolkien's letters, I believe he just refers to Tom as an enigma. Like he doesn't fit into the metaphysics at all.
Right.
There's been all these debates about, is he Maiar, which is, that's what Gandalf is. It's kind of the angelic race. There's Eru, who's the one god. There's the Valar, who are, I think there's like 12 to 15 of them. They're basically like Zeus, Athena, like the big gods. And then there's the Maiar, who are the angels. And so Gandalf, Sauron, many others. And Tom Bombadil does not fit into any of these categories. And when
Exactly.
when Tolkien's asked about it, he says, no, he's not a Maiar. Or I don't know if he explicitly says he's not, but I believe at one point he just says he's just an enigma. He's just someone you meet along the road, and no, he doesn't fit into any of these categories. So it's really weird. But again, in the context of the hero's journey, I think it's kind of like, he's like that wise old counselor who you meet along the road. I don't really know what to make of him. I know there was a lot of gnashing of teeth around the fact that he was left out of the movie. I was okay with it because it doesn't add a ton to the plot. It's a fun little side quest. So I don't have much else on Tom Bombadil if you do, but I definitely got, you mentioned maybe a stand-in for Christ, like some kind of divine force
just
here.
very out of place, but also just completely at home in Middle Earth. Whereas I don't know, it's like I'm trying to think of a crude analogy, but it's like he's walked every square inch of Middle Earth. There's no surprises to him.
Yeah.
Anyway, really interesting guy.
I try to be like Tom.
More of him? Do we see more of him in the books?
No. I think in the Return of the King, Gandalf mentions he wants to stop by Tom's house, to just have a talk with him about business or something. So like, Tolkien reminds you that Bombadil exists. You never have another encounter with him though. So yeah, that's why it's just really weird. It's not like he's a character that even comes back and has a significant plot point. He does give the hobbits their swords, and eventually the one sword, because of where it came from, it was able to like be used to kill a significant character. I won't spoil it for you, but so no, I don't know. He's just a fun character. I try to be like, just like strolling, smiling, whistling, loves his wife, loves creation. He's just kind of carefree. You just kind of stroll around, and you have that kind of attitude, then
you've got to be Bombadil maxing.
Yeah, Bombadil maxing, exactly right. So yeah, I don't know what else to make of him though, other than it's just a fun little detour.
Well, any Bombadil fans in the comments, make sure to tell us what we may not totally understand or what we are completely missing about Tom Bombadil. I think of this is my second reference to George Lucas, but I just think of that line where he's like, Jar Jar's the key to the whole thing. I wonder if Tolkien was like, sitting smoking his pipe, was like, yeah, Tom Bombadil, he's really the key to this whole thing.
No, I don't think so.
No, I know. I don't know. Maybe in his mind, but anyway. Okay, so here's a question that I had, right? And you're probably the guy to ask. Why is Aragorn Strider?
Yeah, so Aragorn's bloodline goes back and back. So in the Silmarillion, which, are you aware of what the Silmarillion is?
Yes, I'm actually looking at it on my shelf right now.
Yeah.
I picked it up at the same time as I picked up Lord of the Rings.
There is only ever one marriage between elves and Maiar, like the angels. It's this elven king. I believe his name is Thingol, and he marries this beautiful angel, and they have offspring. And from this offspring comes both the line of Elrond, who has Arwen, who marries Aragorn, but Aragorn also comes from this line. So Aragorn's basically got this divine blood in him. I believe Aragorn is also descended from, Beren and Luthien were the first ever elf man coupling. And, there's a bloodline from that Aragorn is also part. Oh, because Luthien is Thingol's daughter. So Luthien's part angel herself. She marries this man. And again, so Aragorn comes from this line of Numenorians. It's like Numenor was basically the Atlantis. It was like these men all lived to be 200 years old. They're like the highborn, the well-bred, whatever. And
you could say the high caste. Yeah,
exactly. And so, after the first War of the Ring, when Isildur takes the ring and he eventually dies, then there becomes a lot of chaos and strife in Gondor, and they split into two kingdoms. And the kingdom up north is, I believe, Anor. And so Aragorn comes from that line again. So he's just like long descent, and eventually, that kingdom completely dissolves. Gondor's stops becoming a kingdom. It goes to the stewards, and it's basically, like the line of men is starting to fail. But Aragorn is obviously, there's basically whoever it is, the elves, I think up north, and Elrond, they keep track of who all these people are. They know that Aragorn is still the king. But why is it important that he's Strider? The Rangers are all part of this Numenorian bloodline. And though they're not necessarily descended, like they're not as purebred, I guess you could say, as Aragorn is, they're kind of like his kin, his ethnos. And they need to basically stay hidden because just the forces of the world have pushed them into hiding. And so the Rangers are actually responsible for keeping the Shire safe. So like the free people in the northwest part of Middle Earth don't really know that these Rangers are actually keeping all their communities safe, including Bree. So Aragorn's just sitting there hanging out in Bree, smoking his pipe in that dark corner. And they all kind of look at him like he's this outsider, but he doesn't cause trouble, so we just let him go. But really, I mean, he's the one who's keeping everybody safe. So he needs to be Strider because he needs to stay hidden. He knows it's not his time yet, his people's time to, until obviously the events of the Fellowship start to unfold. But it's sort of that trope, I guess you could say, or maybe Tolkien created this trope, I don't know, of like, the king who's hiding in exile. And since you're in exile, you got to kind of keep a low profile, and that's what led him to be Strider. But there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that you don't really see, and his Ranger kin eventually come back into the story in Return of the King to help fight the battle and such. But that's sort of Aragorn's backstory and why he's kind of just he looks like a vagabond for all intents and purposes when we meet him.
Right, and that reminds me. You said you wondered if that was a creation by Tolkien, but that reminds me of Odysseus when he gets
Ah,
back
yeah.
to Ithaca, and he dresses up as a beggar, and of course, it's been all over the timeline recently of uh, Odysseus's dog, whose name unfortunately I forget right now, but uh,
Argos.
Argos. Yes, the one who sees. Yes, you're totally right. Um, Argos recognizes his master and gives him a wag before
Hmm.
dying. After 20 years of not seeing him. Uh, for anybody who wants a sad dog story today,
Yeah,
unfortunately. R.I.P. Pour one out for Argos, folks. Yeah, eventually. I plan to do the Iliad and the Odyssey at some point, and that'll be fun. But anyway, all that is to say is that I think that's probably where Tolkien got that,
makes sense.
the king in exile. But again, that also another allusion to Christ, and you know this is explicitly a Christian work of fiction, or at least heavily influenced by Christianity. So
Yeah.
where I'm sometimes a little um, a little cautious when invoking the Bible. Here I'm just, every time that I see something, I'm just going to point it out because
Mm,
because it's probably uh, it's probably intentional. We talk about the stewards
yep.
of sorry, what was the kingdom? Not
Gondor.
Gondor. Yes, the stewards of Gondor, right? Remind me of the judges of Israel.
Mm,
And
yeah.
and then eventually we get King David, who is like sort of a proto Jesus in a lot of ways.
I don't think there's a single great work of literature in from the West that Tolkien hasn't read, that he's not aware of, that he's not pulling on for inspiration.
Hmm.
And yeah, you definitely get some of the Bible. I never connected the stewards to the judges, but that's a good connection. I will.
Especially, I mean, the judges just like some of them were okay, but a lot of them just weren't very
Yeah.
effective rulers. And we see. I know a little bit, just from cross cultural pollination. I don't know his name, Faramir's father, Boromir and Faramir's father, who's the current
Yeah.
steward,
Denethor. Yeah.
Denethor. Yeah, what I love also about Tolkien is that his names are on point. They're almost Dickensian.
Hmm.
You can tell just like by the way that each name sounds who's good and who's bad.
Yeah.
You
That's a
know,
good point. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
He's a master with words.
and but yeah, Denethor, he's a steward of Gondor, and he's just he's a massive asshole. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you
Uh,
haven't gotten that far yet, right?
no, I know.
You
It
can
just
kind of
again,
infer.
just from from
Yeah.
what I do know,
Yeah.
uh,
The memes. Yeah. Yeah.
memes and bits and pieces that I've seen of the films.
Sure.
Yeah, I think people are always asking like, who's the one person who hasn't seen X, Y, or Z? And say, well, here I am.
You. Nice.
Um, anyway, uh, yeah, maybe it'd be worth kind of going over each of the fellowship a little bit.
Sure.
We've talked about Gandalf. We've talked about Frodo. Let's dig into Sam a little bit more. He's Frodo's gardener. He's a very very humble young man, uh, very polite, and also more clever than he lets on too.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the novel, Frodo, oh, not novel. It's 2 books of of the novel, right? Because the whole what I found is that Lord of the Rings is one complete work broken up into 6 books
Right.
that are written, 2 and 2 and 2. So at the end of book 2, right, when Frodo decides he has to escape, right, he doesn't want to, massive sacrifice for Frodo, right, to take this on by himself. Uh, he sees Boromir's, Boromir is tested. Boromir fails, and Frodo is like, I can't do this to anyone else. So he decides he's almost putting himself in exile by pursuing this on his own. And Sam right away knows that that's what Frodo's doing, and he's able to catch up to him. So Sam plays like mind reader in a sense. Definitely an underrated aspect of his characters is how clever he is.
He's certainly very smart. He's smart in the way that it's like if you ever meet, I want to use the word redneck, not in a disparaging way. I know personally a lot of rednecks, and they're the best people that I know, and they are very smart. If you were, if you were a New Yorker and you came and you met some of these people that I live with, that are my friends here, you just by talking to them, you might think they're dumb, but they are extremely smart in a really practical sort of way. They might not have like the book knowledge. They might not read the New York Times, right? And you can tell by the way that Tolkien writes Sam. I mean, just the things that he says and how he says it, very witty, definitely very on it, very in tune with like what's going on around him, like physical intelligence. And I mean, Sam is maybe my favorite character to read. Like any time that Tolkien gets into the narrative voice, like he's narrating kind of through the hobbits, is such a treat. Especially the way that Sam, when Sam first meets the elves, there's Gildor, right? So they're still in the Shire, and they meet these elves who are going west because they're going to take the boats out of Middle Earth, and they cross these elves. And just the sense of wonder and awe anytime that Sam interacts with the elves is such a pleasure to read. It's like, anytime actually that you read these experiences between the hobbits and the elves, it's like a dream sequence. And just they feel enchanted, and they almost feel like they lose their sense of time. And I think they even mentioned that it's like, it feels like a dream. And again, just the way that he narrates, whenever he's going through the eyes of the hobbits, and obviously Pippin and Merry, they're such perfect characters. They're almost comedic relief sometimes, but they're really smart too. And Sam's defining characteristic is his loyalty. I think, he's much younger than Frodo. So he's almost like a little brother, but Gandalf gives him this task, and Sam, without a second thought, just like Frodo, hey, I've got to do this. This is my task. I'm going to do it. I don't care about the personal danger that might come to me. Sam's the exact same way. Sam kind of nods off when him and Frodo meet Gildor and the elves, and Gildor's talking with Frodo in private, and he says, Sam is an excellent fellow. He would jump down a dragon's throat to save you. And that's kind of a little, learning moment for Frodo too, because like they're not exactly friends. I mean, they're friendly, but it's not like they're best friends when
it's like an employer relationship at first. He's just like, he's the gardener.
Exactly. And of course they're friendly and they're acquaintances, but it's not until Sam accepts his duty, and now he's extremely loyal. He's an excellent fellow. And you talk about themes. The theme of friendship, fellowship, like masculine friendship, is one of the most powerful ones in this book. And we can go on and on about it, but Sam is exemplary in how he demonstrates those virtues.
Yeah. You think the obvious choice for Frodo's companion would be Pippin, because they're blood related. They're cousins, and Pippin's great, right? And not to take anything away from Merry or Pippin, but they do kind of act in that sort of Rosencrantz, Guildenstern sort of comedic relief aspect of the of the books, which makes their, and this is probably a good time to get into it. Maybe some differences between the films and the novels. when Boromir dies and they're sort of taken away, that just hits a little bit harder because they are these light-hearted sort of silly characters, and brave, definitely brave, and duty bound, but they're the little ones,
Yep. Yep. Yeah. They're like innocent children, and these higher powers, these noblemen have, they've been placed in as basically foster parent isn't the right word, but like they're responsible for them now. Like, hey, we are the nobles. These are the people who we're defending, and they're here in our presence constantly as a reminder of what it is that we're doing this for. So yeah, they play an important role.
There's something so refreshing about a book whose characters don't have to be convinced or harangued into doing the right thing, who see their calling and their duty, and just go and try and do it as best they can. Even in The Hobbit, you have Bilbo, but it's not like they're on some noble quest. They're trying to. I mean, I guess it's kind of noble, but it's not like save the world noble.
Yeah.
They hire Bilbo to be a thief, or a burglar rather, and even he has to be kind of convinced to do it. Whereas Frodo, he jumps at the opportunity more or less. Sam definitely, and Merry and Pippin who don't. And there are a couple other hobbits who start off on the journey with them who decide, no, this is actually too much for us. We have to go back.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember if they think this is too much, like we don't want to get into it, or is it rather they know that they have a role to play. It's like, hey, we know that the Nazgul the ring wraiths are gonna come and look for you guys here, so we've got to keep stuff under control here to kind of throw them off your scent. So it's like they're accepting their duty too. They know that they're actually putting their lives in danger by signing up to this, but it's like, we don't all need to go to you. Some of us need to stay here to take care of this stuff. To make, like, we need to make it look like you're still here to keep up appearances. Otherwise, if your secret gets out, you're in more trouble. So that they kind of, accept their part of the quest too, from my memory. And you've read it more recently than me, so I don't know if maybe they back out.
There were two, and it seems like one of them was like that, and the
Okay.
other was more, I don't want to go into the old forest. I think it was Fredegar.
That makes sense.
Or it was either Fredegar or Fatty Bulger.
But what I love is when Frodo decides to finally tell them, all right, guys,
what we're doing.
Yeah, I've got this secret to tell you. This is why I've been acting weird. They all just say, yeah, we know. Like you murmur to yourself, and we can hear you, and we know you got this ring. We know you got to go to Rivendell, and of course we're going to help you. You couldn't keep us away if you tried. So
right.
I love that. That speaks to the intelligence of the hobbits. They're really nosy, like a lot of the more rural folks that I know and live around. I noticed. Yeah, I used to live in the city. Now I live in the country, and all these folks out here are very nosy as well. I kind of live in a shire myself. And everybody, again, they're super friendly. They give you the shirt off your back, but they are nosy and they are very smart. And if you need something, sometimes you don't even have to ask. You're just like, they're going to come over and help right away. And but yeah, the scene when the hobbits they tell like that was a great little exposure too, because Frodo he had this tension, like it's been working up. He's been waiting to tell them the whole time, and it's just they just cut right through it. So, and again, it speaks to the power of fellowship. Hey, we're your friends. We don't care who these ring wraiths are. Let them try something. We'll take them. And there's just no other option. It's hey, you're my friend, so I'm going to war for you no matter what. And that's an important theme that comes back over and over.
There's something to be said about the Ring of Power, and just how well constructed it is in terms of its rules. Like it's this ever corrupting force
Yeah.
that it captivates you completely, and you shouldn't. And the more that you use it, the more you feel justified in using it further, and the more that you try to resist it, the stronger its hold on you becomes. There's the story of Smeagol and Gollum, right?
Mm.
I'm blanking on the other hobbit's name.
Deagle.
Deagle, yes, Deagle and Smeagol, that's right. Who and Smeagol murders Deagle in like
Yeah.
this Cain and Abel-esque sort of scene where he's just doing it because he's completely captivated by the ring, right? By the precious.
Mm.
It's interesting that he's obviously going to come back later, but it's cool that Tolkien puts that in there right away as a little taste for what is to come.
Yeah.
We could talk about Boromir, which I mean, we're like I said, we're going to try and get through all the principal characters here. There was a meme that I saw not long ago where it was like me as a kid watching Boromir. It's like, no, how could you do this? How could you try and take the ring from Frodo? And it's like me as an adult. Oh man, I completely understand Boromir. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm Boromir. Like
Yeah.
uh, his anyone can be convinced that their actions are just because their intentions are good.
Yes.
You know, the 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 ends almost well, no, I would say that the ends never justify the means, right?
Mm.
Uh, maybe in the short term, you find a solution to your problems through whatever means necessary, right? But we don't live in just the short term.
Mm-hmm.
So every debt has to be paid at some point, right? So Boromir, his short-sighted plan of using the One Ring to destroy or to beat Sauron, maybe it'll work, kind of, right? Luckily it's that path is never really treaded down, or trod down, I guess. Uh, because Tolkien, is better than that. Uh, but if it were to happen, I would think that something much worse was on the horizon. I
Yeah.
think it's at the Council of Elrond where it's brought up. Oh, why don't we use the ring? And everybody's like, no, you can't. Like this thing is Sauron.
Yeah.
It's the whole purpose of its alluring power is to bring it back to Mordor.
Yeah. So just on the
It's itself a siren song.
topic of the ring, there's that saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And, Tolkien certainly uses the Lord of the Rings to explore that idea. And of course, he's not opposed to power as such. Obviously, Aragorn needs to take his throne, wear his crown, and exercise power for the good of his people, for the good of Middle Earth. But there's something to be said for absolute power, or a lust for power,
Mm-hmm.
that or even unnatural power, that Tolkien is obviously warning us about. And just the nature of evil, and it's so perfectly encapsulated in this ring. It's just like an instrument. It's a stand-in for evil in the world. But you hear the wise, quote unquote, so like Gandalf, Elrond, Galadriel, the wise of Middle Earth say these things over and over about how the nature of evil is like a decaying, perverting force that needs to constantly be held in check by virtuous action. So, there's the mirror of Galadriel. Frodo says, I wish that you would take the ring because you'd make everything right. You would, or no, it's Sam tells this to her because he says, he sees the vision of the Shire being dug up. And he's like, Galadriel, you need to take this ring so that you can stop them from harassing my gaffer. And Galadriel says, I would use the ring to do that, but it wouldn't stop with that.
Right.
And Elrond says during his council, that nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron wasn't evil in the beginning. Gandalf, when Frodo originally tries to give him the ring, Gandalf says, I would try to use it for good, but ultimately, my pity for small things would be used against me, which is kind of like an anti-communist sentiment, by the way. Tolkien was not a Democrat, and he writes about this in his letters, about how, humility and charity are good virtues, but when you try to formalize them, they actually become instruments of power. And so, so Gandalf says, I would use this ring to try to do good, but would I eventually, turn the Shire into like a welfare state? I don't know, maybe, so, but anyways, all these comments from all of these learned, wise characters is saying something about the nature of evil, which is threatening to destroy the West. And I love how Tolkien calls it the West in Middle Earth. He says that Lord of the
Very,
Rings,
very subtle, JRR.
Right. He says that Lord of the Rings isn't an allegory, and okay, I take him at his word, but there's allegorical elements anyways. But the nature of evil which threatens to destroy the West is corruption. It's rotting. It's the spirit of perversion.
A horde of bugmen in the East. What did Tolkien mean by this?
Well, yeah. And by the way, they call the orcs maggot folk over, a few times. So bugmen, and the orcs were actually perverted elves over time. It was like a dysgenic. So none of them would do evil out of a motivation to do evil, but they enable it by holding on to this certain kind of power. And the ring just represents that certain kind of power. And so, yeah, it's,
and that is the problem of sin in our world.
Right.
It's like, no matter, feel free to flame me in the comments, folks, but there's the one saying of Jesus where he says, you can't heal these wounds with sullied bandages. It's like human hands are because we are sinful creatures. Anytime that we try to do good, it's never going to be perfectly good. There's always this. I don't have the words, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
There's this flawed character that we have that when we try to do something good, it's not perfectly good. There's always some negative consequence, no matter how small, that may come of it.
Yeah. And so, now getting into Boromir, I mentioned that the nature of evil, it's sort of this force of decay and corruption and rotting almost like winter. It's like just a slow fall. But and I mentioned how it can only really be held back by constantly saying no to it, being vigilant, being virtuous. And I'm really glad that Tolkien wrote the character Boromir, because Tolkien needs to show us what happens if you don't have the strength to say no. So Gandalf turns it down, Galadriel turns it down, Aragorn turns it down, the ring. But Boromir, he's too weak to turn it down, and so he tries to take it. And again, he wants to do it for evil, he wants to use it for good, but if you don't understand the nature of evil, then you can't really fight it. And Boromir does not understand. He's such a great character. I'm glad that Tolkien put him in. You know, I do see these memes where they say Tolkien has, you know, evil is black, good is white. You know, there's no moral gray territory. But you look at Boromir and it's like, well, no, Tolkien's actually doing a really good job of showing you what
Oh yeah,
morally
no,
gray
that
looks
that that
like.
doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah,
There's plenty of gray throughout the books.
yeah,
Yes, there are. In fact, I would say that none of the characters are wholly good, right? They're just not evil.
yeah,
They are creatures, because they're not. I guess people is the word, right? Because they're all
mm,
humanish, right? Uh, but they're all people trying to accomplish a goal because they see it as the right thing to do. But that doesn't mean that it's easy for them. It
yeah,
doesn't mean that they're not. Uh, so they're everyone except for Tom Bombadil, of course, but they're not so corruptible, or they're not incorruptible. You brought up Galadriel before, and she's probably one of the most powerful creatures in Middle Earth, right?
yes,
And she has the wisdom to say no. If I had the ring, I'd use it. And
yeah,
Gandalf says the same thing. Echoing much the same, where it's like, yes, these ancient creatures understand. Elrond, same way, very old, right? So Tolkien is automatically just putting uh, putting such stock into age and wisdom
yeah.
that our culture definitely does not value these days.
Mm.
Uh, well, actually, that's not. We have plenty of old leaders, but none of them seem to have any wisdom at all.
Yeah. Yeah. They've all taken hold of the ring and
Yes.
they want to wield it for progress that they think is good. And I go back and forth. Sometimes I wonder if, some of these elites know what they're doing. I think some of them don't. I think some of them are honestly stupid. I think some of them are just earnestly corrupt and shamelessly lying about it. But it's hard for me to always tell who's who. But in any event,
Yeah, I'd say because a character like Boromir is in the books, or in the book rather, because like I said, he perishes at the beginning of the next book. Uh, it gives me I actually have a little bit more sympathy for people in power today, at least more than I did. That's not to say it's a whole lot, but it's a little bit, right? Um, then I mean you've got Gimli, who's sort of another. I would say unintentionally funny.
mm,
Uh, just because of the way that he kind of acts and walks around, and he a very very proud dwarf.
yeah.
Uh,
I will say, I think in the movie they overdo the
mhm.
comedic relief
I
of
was going to
Gimli.
ask about that.
Yeah, they do. I know you haven't seen all the movies all the way through, but they abuse it a little bit in the movie. It's not, it doesn't really cause a lot of damage, but I prefer the book Gimli because it's a little bit more subtle humor, and I think he's more of a stern, proud dwarf, and yeah, he's definitely unique. Like there's no mistaking him for Legolas, right? So
Yeah, they're. I mean, if you wanted to go into tropes, it's like those two guys. There's always like I guess Merry and Pippin are kind of like that too, but they're just the two guys that are always they're I guess closest thing to like a buddy cop duo.
yeah,
And that's very sort of clunky analogy. But I've just got this rotted pop culture laden brain that I have to make these ham-fisted
yeah.
analogies.
But the great thing about Gimli and Legolas, even though they start off and they're antagonistic because dwarfs just don't really like elves, they eventually, in the end, become the very best friends. The movie does a good job of showing that, And it's really actually Galadriel is kind of the turning point, because when they leave, Gimli has a change of heart. You know, he doesn't like elves until he gets into Lothlorien and he sees Galadriel and her beauty, and he falls in love. And you know, he asks for a strand of hair, and I think of that that Anne Hathaway meme, like, what a forward young dwarf
Yeah,
you
what a
are.
forward young dwarf you are. Yeah, and she gives him 3, you know, like
Yeah, and that is what causes him to appreciate elves more, and then Legolas appreciates Gimli more because of that scene. And actually, this is pretty a special scene, because I think that Feanor, who is the High King of all elves in the Silmarillion, like the OG, fiercest, wisest elf of all time, I think that he wants a strand of Galadriel's hair, like back in the day, because he's smitten by her, and Galadriel turns him down. And Legolas is well aware of that when Gimli tells Legolas this story. So, you know, it all kind of connects. And it's a special scene where that they both, that's where their friendship really starts to germinate.
there's a scene earlier before they get to Lothlorien where they're in the mines of Moria, and Gimli is hopeful to see Balin, who is one of the hobbits from, or not one of the dwarves from The Hobbit,
Yeah.
only to find out that they've been killed.
Yeah.
And there's a sorry if you hear my dog.
You're good.
Somebody's out there. Anyway, Tolkien has a special talent for subtlety here. He could easily overdo, you know, maybe Gimli's grief or something, you know, really pump up the melodrama, but it's subtle, it's delicate, and it's undercut, you know, because of the Balrog.
The Bridge of Khazad Dûm, that chapter is like a chapter out of a horror novel. I've read a little bit of horror novels, but just the tension and like the palpable fear and just the way that Tolkien writes, and he keeps saying doom, doom, you know, like the sounds, the tension and the fear that builds up in that chapter is, I couldn't believe that Tolkien had that in him when he wrote it, but like,
That's just straight World War One. Like that's his
yeah,
you know, the word trauma is so overused these days, but that's just straight out of the trenches.
that makes sense.
You know,
The tone of that chapter is different from everything that came before, and I think everything that comes after, like, this is a
it is the
standalone.
turning point of the whole book, because before
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, we have this, yes, we're escaping the ring wraiths, right? You know,
yeah,
we haven't really even really met them. You know, our characters are always sort of one step ahead of them,
yeah,
if barely, you know.
yeah.
Frodo's almost killed. I think it's what, like either chapter 8 or 9. He's almost killed, and he puts on the ring to escape being killed. But otherwise, you know, it's the danger doesn't really set in until we're at the bridge, and until Gandalf dies. And you're like, what the heck? You know, Gandalf's like
Yeah.
the most powerful. He's the most powerful member of the Fellowship. He can't die.
Yeah.
You know, like, what are we gonna do now? We're pretty screwed. And yeah, just
I had
really
not
well.
read the books yet when I first saw this in theaters, and when Gandalf fell, that moment is, I remember that theater experience more than any in my life. Like, that moment was just, it changed my world. And but yeah, the whole chapter, I wish I would have read the book first, because the chapter is just, it's like a trance. Like, I start reading that chapter and it's just like, my heart starts racing. It's so well written. But
It's funny.
anyways,
The previous episode to this, I did L.A. Confidential with Glenn Rockney. Everybody should go check that out. By the way, great episode. But I was talking about how I prefer to watch the movie before reading the book, because one, the book is almost always better, right? So you're never disappointed by reading the book second, because you get to enjoy what they do with with the film or the show, what have you, and then reading the book. You and I didn't. The first episode you and I did together was on A Gentleman in Moscow,
Yeah.
and you and I both tried to watch the series, and it's just awful.
I never actually watched a minute of the
you don't.
series.
Well, don't waste your time.
I think you mentioned you were DMing me because you started watching it before I did, and you mentioned a couple things, and I'm like, nope, I'm not going to patronize this.
I'm done. Goodbye.
Yeah.
No, so. and that was the right call. I stopped after 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Just my rule for film adaptation is watch the film first, and then read the book, and you'll be sort of a happier person for it, I think. Because everybody, the film, the Fellowship of the Ring, even the extended cut doesn't have Tom Bombadil in it.
Right.
It's not a complete adaptation.
Yeah.
And some people are really mad about that. Other people, see
Yeah.
the film and they're like, oh wow, there's this guy Tom Bombadil. I haven't even heard of him. That's cool.
Yeah, that's fair. It makes the book a little better. I really never felt any animosity towards Peter Jackson for not putting Tom Bombadil in. I know that purists got upset or whatever, but the extended edition is so long, and even the regular cut is so long. There's just there was literally no time to put it in, and if you can cut anything out, it's unfortunate. But there's a couple other scenes like that. They're at the farmer Maggot's house. They don't show that in the movie either. And obviously Tom Bombadil's a little bit more special than Farmer Maggot, but sometimes you just got to cut some things in a movie. So I didn't really care too much. I got more complaints in book 3, I think, but or part 3, but
they really do kind of gloss over the five homes in the film, as far as my recollection goes.
The 5 homes.
Yeah. I think it's or the 5 houses. I don't know. It's something that I read once.
Anyways.
Anyway.
So we were in Moria. We were in the mines.
Yes. There was one more thing that I wanted to bring up. You mentioned earlier, and I guess this might be more appropriate for Return of the King, right? But you mentioned way earlier that later the rest of the Rangers come to Aragorn's aid.
Yeah.
And we know, I know about the scouring of the Shire, right? And I'm wondering, just not having read it, but knowing of it, like, is it because the Rangers left to go fight for Aragorn that the Shire is left unprotected?
No.
All
right. We'll save this for a future.
Right, yeah,
but I will say, we can tease it a little bit, because I don't know if you caught this, TR, but in book 1, when they get to Bree, they meet they describe him as an ill-favored, squint-eyed fellow in Bree, and he's talking to people, like the hobbits overhear this conversation. This ill-favored fellow's foretelling that there's going to be a lot of people coming north in the future. There's trouble down south, and if room isn't found for them up here, they're going to find it in the cells. They have a right to live just the same as other folk, he said loudly, and the local inhabitants did not look too pleased at the prospects.
Yes.
So a little bit of asylum seeker,
refugees welcome.
refugee foreshadowing here. That we'll touch on in the Return of the King, but there's layers to this. And Tolkien, like I said, I one of my other schizo theories, and I have a thread. I know that Twitter is for fun and effort posting is frowned upon, but I wrote a thread. I should have put it in Substack, but I wrote a long thread. I personally believe Lord of the Rings, Tolkien says it's not an allegory. I think it's closer to an apocalypse. And by apocalypse, I mean a revelation of the end of an age. There's so much, there are so many parallels between Tolkien's West and our West that can't just, and there was not even a refugee crisis that Tolkien was aware of that he could have written about at the time that he wrote this book. But sure enough, it's something that the hobbits are going to have to deal with, And there's, like I said, there's the seeds have been planted here in book 1. And yeah, so we'll come back to Bree and the Shire another time.
So our next, I guess our next character is the elven or the elf archer and prince Legolas,
Yes.
who's the other who's the counterpoint to the dwarf Gimli. Uh, now, remind me, what is his relationship to Elrond?
Legolas has no relationship to Elrond unless it's something very distant. But in The Hobbit, Bilbo goes over the Misty Mountains and then he goes into Mirkwood, and Mirkwood is kind of going to shit, but there's an elven kingdom in the good neighborhood of Mirkwood, and Legolas is the prince of that woodland realm. So he's just, yeah.
Got it.
No relation to Elrond, but kind of just, the representative.
Right, just another elf. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely highborn.
That's also what's really cool about Tolkien is that lesser fantasy writers, I guess, like high fantasy writers, would just have, oh, this is the race of men, this is the race of elves, this is the race of dwarves, and they're all pretty much related to each other. No, these each race has their own kingdoms and branches of each, much like so the nations of Europe or the nations of Asia.
Yeah, there's races, and then there's basically ethnicities within them.
Yes, that was the word I was looking for, ethnicities. Yes. So Legolas, obviously he's known as the archer. He's played by Orlando Bloom in the films. I did see all the Hobbit films. I was old enough at this point where my friends took me to go see the Hobbit films because they were all really into Lord of the Rings, so I just kind of went with them. Just being in the army,
Sure.
There wasn't a whole lot else to do, so you just go to the base theater and see whatever was on. And I remember a lot of people being mad that Legolas was included in The Hobbit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't care for the Hobbit movies. I watched the first 2, I think, in theaters, and then I wasn't pleased, so I didn't even watch the third one in theaters. Peter Jackson definitely took a lot more artistic liberty with The Hobbit than he did with Lord of the Rings. So, Legolas, like I said, he's from that woodland realm. It might make sense to give him a little bit of a cameo. I think Peter Jackson gave him a little bit more screen time than Tolkien gave him. I don't think Tolkien mentioned him at all in The Hobbit. So, but yeah.
Yeah, Legolas is definitely. I was expecting more from him, honestly, in the book. Maybe we'll get more from him later, but he's basically, he's kind of there for a while. He gets the longbow from Galadriel, and otherwise it's just him kind of, feuding with Gimli a little bit.
Yeah, he's definitely a little bit of just a role player, like just another guy, a stand-in. Obviously, part of the broader context of the plot is the elves are fading away, and now it's time for the age of men in Middle-earth. And so I guess you would expect the elf in the Fellowship to not have a strong personality or like a major role. But, I will say he's still an important character because, again, this theme of fellowship, and again, the book's called The Fellowship of the Ring, obviously, and the theme being masculine friendship. Legolas, I think, is important in this, specifically how he connects with Gimli, and he is another if elves and dwarves can bridge their disagreements, if you've got like a New Yorker can become friends with like a rural Alabama guy, that kind of lends to the theme of, hey, like we've got to team up and put our differences aside because we got a much bigger issue here in the world. Like, it's like RFK teaming up with Trump or something. It's
right.
It's just someone from a different world. And so he again, he contributes to the theme just with his presence and how the relationships develop. So I will say that, but no, I don't really have many more comments on Legolas. I think that the movie Troy came out the same year as The Fellowship of the Ring, and Orlando Bloom is the pretty boy Archer in both of those movies.
Yeah.
So
That's
maybe there's something to this.
Yeah. And then he's also, he's the main character in Kingdom of Heaven. He's the protagonist in the what do they call it? The not Lord of the Rings. Why am I blanking on the pirate movie? Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh yeah,
the first three of those. He's sort of the hero of that. He really does have he's a pretty prolific career for an actor nobody really kind of likes.
Yeah, he did all right for himself. Yeah, but like I said, just that one year.
He's the king of doing one thing really well.
There you go. Yeah, he looks good on the screen. I'll give him that. So,
Yeah.
but I got nothing else
No
on
homo.
Legolas. Right, of course. Yeah. Right.
So then,
handsome fellow.
Yeah. So then we've got Elrond. I think Elrond and Galadriel are probably the last two that we can really get into with some depth. I know they're going to return later as well, so some more good stuff from them. But Elrond, I didn't put together that he was only half elf.
Mm-hmm.
So he's so old that he was the spawn of an earlier elven man marriage.
Well, I'm trying to remember how far down, like how many generations away he was from Beren and Luthien, the man and elf. I think he's quite a few generations down, and in fact, his parents then. Oh man, who were his parents? I should know this, but yeah, I mean, since he's half elven, I think his father was Arendelle, which was an elf, and his mother, don't quote me on that. I'm going to get it wrong, but in any event, he got to choose basically if he wanted to be immortal or mortal, and he chose to be an elf. And then I think his brother chose to go the route of men. But yeah, a little interesting backstory there. Elrond's basically like the king of Elvendom in Middle Earth. I know there's Legolas's dad, Thranduil, is out there in Mirkwood, but they're out in this boondocks, like no one really cares what's going on.
The less well-to-do elves, the white trash elves.
Yeah, and then Galadriel is like the queen of Elvendom in Middle Earth, and again the theme, or I guess the context of the broader plot is elves are going away, their power's fading, but they have a lot of wisdom and tools that they can still give.
Go into that a little bit more.
Why
is the power? Why are these immortal beings? Why is their power fading? Why is the age of men rising?
Well, I mean, really, you would have to go to the start of the Silmarillion, where Eru, the One, cast his thought into the void, and his thoughts became the Ainur, which is like their one name for they became the Valar, and the Valar then basically started singing together and making this grand chorus, and Melkor, the bad Valar, started sowing discord in there, and it didn't sound so great. And so this song became basically, Eru turned the song into physical manifestation, and basically the divine plan all the way from this beginning, when God's thought started to vibrate and take to form, was they were going to have two children. They were going to have elves and they were going to have men. And the elves were always destined to come back to Valinor, which is where the Valar live. It's like on the west side of the ocean. Actually, they started over there, and then some of them went east, and a lot of them stayed west. And all the ones that went east, they tried to set up their own kingdoms over there on the east side of the sea in Middle Earth and all that territory. And didn't go so great. They made a lot of good things, but it was always basically appointed by the gods that the age of men was going to unfold in Middle Earth. And, if I'd have known that we were going to get in here, I would have maybe prepared some more notes, but I mean, basically like the men they're obviously mortal, but it's like they're blessed by their mortality, and the way that they build and create the world is so unique in a way that the elves can like hardly even comprehend. It's like, wow, they're so industrious. They're like building, whereas the elves are more just kind of like naturalists, like, and so now is the time, they've been in this eternal battle with Melkor, the big bad Valar, and then Sauron, who was like his lieutenant, who was more of the Maiar, the angel. And they tried to beat Sauron and they couldn't. And they just slowly started to realize this task isn't for us. Like men were always appointed to live over here. We were always appointed to live over there in the undying lands. And it's sort of just like this natural progression of, hey, the elves, hey, this is our time. And I'm probably not doing it justice there. That's kind of the broad strokes, though, I think. And their numbers are dwindling in Middle Earth because people have just been leaving, even long before Sauron. They beat Sauron back in the first War of the Ring, and it was however many thousands of years before the events of the Fellowship of the Ring. And in that downtime, when Sauron was basically gone, the elves had just slowly started to leave, and they figured, hey, we got to continue. We don't have enough people here. This is not our destiny. Like, this is for men. Like I said, I wish I could do a better job explaining the rationale. For why don't they just stay and fight? But it's just, hey, it's not our duty. Basically, it's not our destiny. So they want to help before they leave, but
sometimes that's enough. It's just that it's not our destiny.
Yeah. So sorry. I mean, that was like a big, it started with the Big Bang. So,
I don't know. We're an hour and a half in. I figured it would be an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I just wanted to, what have we not covered that you're like biting at the bit to get to?
I wanted to talk just more about the fellowship theme. I've got a few quotes here and like examples because, I was talking with another guy in a space on Twitter, William Coleman. I don't know if you follow him at all.
Yeah.
He was doing a space there was another guy who has like a Greek name handle that I didn't. But anyways, he started talking. He's like, man, why does this story just resonate so much with all of our guys? Like, everybody loves it. It's like, it's something that's so powerful. Like, how do you put your finger on it? And I hopped on and I said, other than the fact that I think there's so many parallels with our own world, the way that Tolkien delivers on the theme of fellowship, of masculine friendship is really inspiring. And it's something that like ignites a desire in all of us in this, atomized world that we live in. I've got a bunch of friends. I'd say I've got like a best friend that, like if he was homeless, I would like let him live in my home. But like how many of us truly have like friends that we would die for,
Mm-hmm.
like, so you were in the Army and I think that you probably got to experience that, which is a good thing. But Lord of the Rings really hits it. It sort of lights this fire like inside of all of us that like it lights this desire for something that we didn't know that we were missing. And I think that's one of the reasons why we love it so much, that like it calls to us. It's like, hey, we could have nice things. Like we could have this. Look how powerful it is. Look how good it is. And so that theme, I think I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but is something that's important. And so I have, there's a few quotes here. Like I said, first, when Frodo and Sam are with Gildor, and Gildor says, Sam would jump down a dragon's throat to save you. So there's one example. This doesn't happen until the Two Towers, but I'm going to talk about it here just because it's in the theme of fellowship, and we're talking about that book. But so Merry and Pippin are stolen, and the orcs take them west, and eventually Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, their search takes them into Fangorn Forest. And Gimli, they've been running, they haven't been eating, and Gimli is like, look, Aragorn, if we don't find these hobbits soon, we're not going to be of any use to them because we're just going to have to sit next to them and starve to death together. And Aragorn says, if that's all we can do, then that's what we have to do. So like this king is willing to die for two hobbits. This king who has this grand destiny ahead of him. They're not Merry and Pippin don't even appear to be of vital importance to the quest anymore. But because they are his friends, Aragorn puts at risk, failing to achieve his own grand destiny to sit and starve with these guys because they're part of the fellowship, because they are his friends. And this is exactly really what makes him worthy, Aragorn, of the title that he seeks, because he shows this virtue. So that was a really powerful scene. That kind of gave me some chills. When they're fighting in Helm's Deep, Theoden says that when dawn comes, we're going to sound Helm's horn and I'm going to ride out. And, Aragorn, are you going to ride with me? And Aragorn says, yes. He says, I will ride with you. So it's just another opportunity to throw his life away and his destiny in this, battle that there's no hope of winning right now, just because friendship compels him. When Sam sees Frodo's been stung by Shelob, the spider, the way that Tolkien writes the inspiration that Sam feels that'll give you chills. It's just the power of fraternal love compels Sam to kill this big thing. And I won't actually read it because just when you read it, it'll give you chills. And Merry decides to ride to war with the Rohirrim to almost certain death. And he says, Merry didn't want to hear anymore. He slipped away to get ready for summons to the march. This was the last stage before the battle. It did not seem likely that any of them would survive, but he thought of Pippin and the flames in Minas Tirith, and he thrust down his own dread and carried on. I got all these quotes. But just over and over and over, all these guys are inspired to acts of basically self-destruction, like certain death, but it's because of the love that I have for my friends that I'm going to do this. And, there's some other authors in our space who write about the importance of, you really just need a small circle of friends and, complete loyalty to each other, and you can change the world. And I think The Lord of the Rings is sort of a story about like a right-wing counter-revolution. Like you've got these nationalist Western men who are trying to fight against this spirit, this disembodied force of like globalism, global like industrial technological progress. Everyone's going to be slaves. And, well, how do you defeat that force and take your country back for your people? Fellowship is a very important element, maybe the most important element. If you don't have that, if you don't have a band of brothers that you're willing to die for, then you're not going to succeed in your political quest. So,
well, and also, you brought up Aragorn's lineage and his destiny to be king, but one would also say that he could not achieve his destiny were he not the man who constantly tries to save his friends, to lay down his life for what is right.
Right.
What kind of king would he be if he weren't that noble? There's you've brought up all of these examples, and it makes me think, John 15:13, there's no greater love than the man who would lay down his life for his friends.
Yes.
That's one thing. Like every man should have that like carved into some wood into his space somewhere, whether it's in your office or your quote unquote man cave, or even just in your car. Just have a little plaque that says like you are not a man if you are not ready to die for someone other than yourself.
Yes. And obviously, we have our families, our wives, and, I would die for them. But
but also, family, like wives and children are different because you don't expect them to also die for you.
Exactly. Yes. That's pretty
You
much what I was
know,
just going to say. Yeah.
when
To
you
have a
have your
band of
friends, when you have
brothers.
your brothers, yes. The
Yeah.
expectation is that the love that you have for each other is so strong that you would die for one another. And it's
Fellowship. Sorry.
then yeah, it's expected that you should die for your wife and your children. You know, maybe even your parents to an extent, right? If you're a young
Yep.
man and your parents are old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But but there's just such another type of love. You know, the Greeks have the three different words for love, and this really is agape, is the love that men have for each other in friendship.
Fellowship is maybe the most valuable um, spiritual value, moral value um, in politics. I'll say if you don't have the band of brothers that you're willing to go die for, yeah, then your people are gone, are dead. So you're not going to survive. So um, I think that I just wanted to stress that, and I kind of bounced around there, and I apologize, but just again, the theme of friendship and masculine friendship and how
Sorry,
Tolkien delivers
I
it.
misspoke. I said agape is that it's actually uh I wanted to look it up. It's philia, is the love between friends.
Okay, yeah, I'm not good at Greek,
Agape
but
is
yeah,
more the love God, the unconditional. I mean, it's kind of there, but it's more philia, I'd say.
okay.
Certainly, you know, you look through literature, and you know, I'm looking up some examples of philia, and you've got you know, Roland and Oliver from the Song of Roland, or Orestes and Pylades. So yeah, I would say that more fits the Fellowship of the Ring. So apologies, listeners, for misspeaking there.
Achilles, if
And
Patroclus
Patroclus, yeah,
wasn't
Patroclus,
uh, wasn't
Patroclus, yeah.
killed, then Achilles would not have done what he did and achieved his undying fame. So again, it's a theme that's important in Western canon. Tolkien crushes it, and again, I apologize for bouncing around a little bit, but I wanted to hit on it since it's the title of this book, how important it is, and just share a few quotes that inspired me. And the only other thing that I wanted to, I don't if we want to end on this or not, but this just stood out to me. This is changing gears now. Just a really quick little example that made me chuckle. When Frodo and Sam are with Gildor, right? This is still back like early, still kind of in the Shire. The first time they meet elves. Um, Gildor gives Frodo a warning, because Frodo's kind of thinking like, oh, maybe we're in above our heads. Maybe we should just, stay in the Shire and give this task to somebody else. And Gildor says, but it is not your Shire. Others dwelt here before hobbits were, and others will dwell here again when hobbits are no more. The wide world is all about you. You can fence yourself in, but you can never fence it out. End quote. And that just makes me think of Aaron McIntyre tapping the sign of the side that wants to win will always
Right,
beat the
right.
side that wants to be left alone. And again, that's just that's inspirational to me personally. I'd love to just retreat from the public world and try and take care of my own business, but there's some big bad forces out there, and if normal men, if hobbits like you and I, don't ever summon heroism, then our neighborhoods are going to go to shit. And so, yeah,
Right.
again, I
There's
think,
there's that much maligned Moldbug essay of the dark elves and the hobbits.
yeah,
But you know, in, it's the hobbits that save the day. You know,
you need the elves. Like I said, the lofty powers are going to do what they're going to do, and unless we've got any budding JD Vances in your listenership here who are going to walk into Mordor and try to destroy the ring, there's still room for heroism in all of our own personal worlds. And again, Tolkien himself admits in his letters, he says, I am a spiritual hobbit. And you, my son, he's writing to his son, Christopher, he says, you're a hobbit too. And he wrote this book for hobbits, for spiritual hobbits. And so, sure, yeah, dark elves got to go, they got to do what they got to do. But the hobbits are the heroes of this particular story. And what is it about them that makes them heroes, that enables them to save their worlds? Well, they've got to summon they got to undergo their own hero's journeys. So you can't just check out of the world. The side that wants to win is going to beat the side that wants to be left alone. That's all I got from the fellowship. We could go on and on, but I know we've probably got a couple more spaces or podcasts here to take care of it. So
we're going to do 2 more, and then maybe we'll do the Hobbit. I think that'll be fun too. That was great. And for anybody out there who's listening to this, neither of us are Tolkien scholars. There's the Middle Earth remixer, I think, or somebody out there does a really Middle. I think he has a podcast, right?
Maybe, yeah. I'm not aware of it.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. I know there are better, quote unquote, better podcasts on Tolkien that everybody should go listen to. This is more, just a couple of guys, a couple of hobbits talking about the book.
I am a Tolkien scholar, sir. Speak for yourself.
Very well. Oh, I am certainly not, though I appreciate the art form. Nikolas, where can people find your stuff? How can they help you become an even greater Tolkien scholar out there? When is Semperis coming to the world?
I am going to publish Semperis Part 1 in 2025. It's nearly ready. I think I'm going through the final rounds of edits right now. It is a fantasy.
On my read through of what you gave me, thinking back, I see the Tolkien influence.
Yes, I certainly don't try to be Tolkien at all, but I have I'll call it a low fantasy trilogy. There's no elves, but I've split it into 3 parts. I also split each part into 2 books just as an homage. But some of the themes I try to pull from Tolkien as well, again, to do homage to him. And I'm not the most talented writer, but I think this is I think I found a really good story and compelling characters. And so if you appreciate characters and themes, look for Semperis in 2025. And I'm going to DM you the link to this Tolkien thread. I don't know if you put it in the show notes.
Yeah, no, I'll put it in the show notes. I was going to ask, so I'm glad that we're on the same wavelength here. Yeah, definitely send it to me, and I will put it in the show notes for the good listeners. As for over here at the Double Dealer magazine and podcast and media group, I guess we are accepting manuscripts and short stories for our next issue. We're going to be doing a little something different for the next issue of the Double Dealer, where we're going to try and pre-fund before we release. So more details on that will be coming out soon, if not already by the time that this podcast is out. If you would like your very own episode of Canon Fodder or series of books, in the case of Nikolas here, you can become a paid subscriber. You can support what we're doing. Every cent that we are making, we're trying to get out to writers and artists, and trying to build culture from the ground up. So you are supporting men of good character and quality who are trying to write and draw and make the things that are not fake and gay. I have a couple of books also. You can check those out. You know where to find them. doubledealer.substack.com for a few shorts from co-founder of the Double Dealer, J.L. Mackey, aka Tom Edgman, as well as some articles here and there, and every episode of this podcast. I don't know how to end podcasts, so I will just say insert ending here.